Yet more fraud in the Canadian real estate market has been unveiled by Sam Cooper. He has dropped this mind-blowing story about what is going on and all the fraudulent mortgages that HSBC wrote. So let's get right into this. What is going on? Fake Chinese income, mortgages fuel Toronto real estate bubble, HSBC bank leaks. Sam Cooper has exposed this, and if you don't know, guys, Sam Cooper wrote this amazing book called Willful Blindness, which I've read. Thank you, Eric, for sending me your copy. And if you want a copy of this, I'll leave a link in the description, but it is highly worth looking into his book there. And anyway, let's get on to this because it is really a mind-blowing story. The whistleblower, a Canadian business school graduate, was staggered by the suspicious home loans he discovered in 2022 when he joined a mortgage approval team in a small HSBC branch on the outskirts of Toronto. He knew of suspicious surrounding Chinese capital in British Columbia real estate, but had never witnessed shady lending while working at a HSBC branch in Campbell River, town on the east coast of Vancouver Island. When he arrived at HSBC's bank in Aurora, an affluent suburb north of Toronto, he discovered explosive growth in loans to Chinese diaspora buyers during the pandemic. And just for a second, let's take a little pause here just to remember, guys, I've always repeated and said that this bubble could not been have allowed to grow to the extent that it has grown here without fraud. You have to have a fraudulent component. The reason why is, well, you've just got to look at incomes. If you look at incomes down here, this is literally showing how incomes have grown. And you can see, guys, it's barely grown at all. But if you look at home prices, they have absolutely skyrocketed along with debt. So what does that tell you about what's going on in the real estate market? It doesn't tell you good things are going on. And you know for a fact that there is fraud going on, because how are people buying these homes if they don't have the income? And it's things like this that are driving it, and many other things, subprime mortgages, etc. So Chinese migrants living across Toronto were obtaining mortgages from HSBC while supposedly extravagant salaries from remote work jobs in China. In one example, an Ontario casino worker that owned 3 homes also claimed to earn $345,000 in 2020, analyzing data remotely for a Beijing company. Before joining HSBC Canada, the whistleblower had studied fake income mortgage frauds for his business master's degree at Vancouver Island University. After arriving at Aurora in February 2022, while digging into the branch's loan books and interrogating his colleagues, he made mind-blowing assessments. Since 2015, the whistleblower concluded more than 10 Toronto area HSBC branches had issued at least $500 million in home loans to diaspora buyers, claiming exaggerated incomes or non-existent jobs in China. This is just crazy. And you've got to remember, obviously, HSBC is a Chinese bank. It's an international bank as well. HSBC, obviously, global bank, and it has connections all over the world, but it did start out in Hong Kong. Anyway, it's just really interesting, the historic connections and then what's happening here. But it is crazy. So while a small bank of Aurora's size was expected to issue around 23 million in residential loans every year, this branch had shoveled out 88 million in 2020, according to the whistleblower, and over 50 million in 2021. The whistleblower, whom the Bureau is calling DM, immigrated to Canada as an international student from India, making him a minority among mostly Chinese Canadian co-workers at the Aurora Bank. As DM probed his colleagues, his belief gained conviction that HSBC Canada and other Canadian banks, including CIBC, had systematic problems with highly questionable mortgages issued to diaspora buyers with unverified sources of wealth in China. So how does that make you feel, guys, about the banking system in Canada right now, considering that this this guy is an insider here, and he is telling us literally it's not just HSBC, it's other banks that are issuing these mortgages too. And like I said, guys, you only have to look at a chart here to realize, hold on a second, something is going on. But unfortunately, during these bubbles, people like to make stories out. They like to make these stories out that home prices are rising because of immigration, because of this, because of that, when in reality, there is no excuse. I repeat, there is no excuse for home prices outpacing income apart from fraudulent type behavior or massive leveraging. And in Canada, we've had both of those things happen. We've had massive leveraging, which has allowed people who own to just leverage upon leverage upon leverage themselves to set themselves up like a stack of dominoes ready to fall. And then you've also got the fraudulent component, not just from Chinese people. We've covered many times on this channel. One of the first videos I ever did on this channel was about fraud. You guys who followed the channel for a long time know that. And that was all the way back in 2021. And people were laughing in my face when I said fraud in the Canadian banking system. But it's really simple. Like I said to you guys, you've only got to look at the growth of income compared to that of home prices, which you can see on Hilliard's chart here. And I would go follow him. He's a great guy. And he wrote a fantastic book, which I would highly recommend you read. And he called this thing early, but he was not wrong at all about the Canadian housing bubble. So it is built on a load of fictional loans and fake wealth, as you would expect. And guess what, guys? RBC has been approved to buy HSBC. So who is going to be holding the bag on all these mortgages potentially? RBC is going to be the one who's going to be stepping up and buying these. So anyway, let's continue on with this article. So similarly, what DM found in his probe of pandemic era loans could be called the evolving Toronto method. And Sam Cooper wrote about this in his book, which I again would highly recommend you read. And it was called the Vancouver model, an underground banking system discovered first in Vancouver and found to be laundering a stunning $1.2 billion in cash from mainland China through British Columbia government casinos in 2014. This system of shadowy transfers was dubbed the Vancouver model by an Australian professor and brings together transnational organized crime, affluent Chinese nationals seeking to export their wealth abroad, and Canadian casinos, banks, and real estate in transactions that evade policing because the pivotal cash exchanges are done off the books by professional money launderers serving the global Chinese diaspora. According to FinTrack's 2023 study of 48,000 pandemic-era transactions, this evolving Vancouver model network simultaneously facilitates money laundering and the circumvention of Chinese currency controls. As a result of the temporary closures of the Canadian casinos due to the pandemic, professional money launderers began to diversify their money laundering methods, FinTrack's study said. And then you can basically see they've done a great chart here, and I'll link this article below, of what exactly is happening with this money and how it actually gets to the end point of real estate or wherever it's going, into cars, luxury cars, all these different things. And you can understand why so many people would turn a blind eye to this type of thing. It's because real estate, people are making huge amounts of money on writing these loans, on selling these properties. So there's a massive incentive for them to be corrupt. They are highly corruptible if you think about it. And as the prices only rise and their commissions stay the same percentage, the problem just increases and increases and increases. And what most people don't understand is this is highly connected to the fentanyl and drug opioid crisis that we have in Canada today. And Sam Cooper wrote about this in his book. I would highly recommend you read that book. It was one of the most fascinating books that I've ever read. And it's a phenomenal piece of work that's been put together really over the course of over 30 years, which shows Canada's connection to Hong Kong and China, and also how that money circulates, where that money is coming from, and unfortunately the ramifications of such things happening. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to see what, if anything, the authorities do about what's going on here, because I mean, it's been going on for so long. long, it's kind of hilarious that it's still going on today. And Canada is still seen as like one of the money laundering capitals of the world. And obviously, if the Chinese nationals who are getting these mortgages don't have the income to pay for it, then guess what's going to happen? Those loans, they may well not be in good shape. Because if you think that is what has been driving real estate prices up in places like Toronto and Vancouver for so long, then what's going to happen eventually when those people can't pay? Or what's going to happen essentially when the government finally realizes, or somebody gets involved, does something, and then the unintended consequences are these people flee and the loans essentially are burnt, written off, and the banks are holding the bag. And when you look, RBC taking over HSBC, for example, I mean, this could be a really bad acquisition for them if they've just took on a boatload of fraud. And it's not just HSBC. This guy is saying in this article that this is systemic. It's systemic and it's happening across all the banks in Canada. And people, like I said, they're turning a blind eye to it. Why? Because of the money. And that's all they can see, the dollar signs, the greed. And that's what unfortunately happens. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video and you're looking for a VPN to get around Trudeau's censorship laws, you know where to go. Go to expressvpn.com/market mania. And if you've enjoyed this video, you might want to check out this video up here that I would highly recommend you watch.